and I'm going to formally welcome you to Streaming Sets, Jesse. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I so want to ask you, like, how did you get involved in Bitcoin? What's your origin story in the space?
It I think it really started just hearing about it from my brother, and then I think shortly thereafter, I had graduated from college and took a temp job working in a call center, and that's when I learned about all of these class action lawsuits that were against banks, where banks primarily in the U.S. Were doing some somewhat shady things like reorganizing debit card transactions to maximize overdraft fees. And so that's a big thing in the U.S. Overdraft fees are basically when your account runs out of money, you would pay $30 each time. And so I was looking for alternatives, and and eventually I stumbled onto Bitcoin, which was really a system that operates based on consensus. So that really appealed to me because it would be impossible to introduce any of those adversarial policies like the banks had done. And instead, it would be a system that operates completely based on rules that everybody agrees on. That's what consensus means. So it was really something that was completely different and gave me a lot of hope that we could build a better system that's open to anyone.
So how did you grok that immediately that, it's based on consensus and wouldn't be able to cheat you the way banks do that? What was your background to make you capture that as the main thing that's different from the in the Bitcoin network?
Oh, you just gave me a lot more credit than maybe I deserve, because I did not grok it immediately. It did take me a long time to understand, how this is fundamentally different. And it really came from a perspective of saying, there's no way that this thing could work. There has to be a flaw in it somehow. There's no way you could have internet-based money. Like, it'll get hacked. The government will stop it. Um, and so it's coming from the perspective of trying to prove it wrong. And also the price going down at that point, after I had initially invested in it. It really motivated me to figure out, do I sell this thing or not? And going through that research process of finding out, okay, is now the right time to sell it, was actually what pushed me to do the research and to understand. But my background is in environmental engineering, and in that in that engineering study, it's a lot of math and physics courses, and most of it was around water treatment, which actually has to do a lot with flows, and that actually became very helpful when I dove deeper into the Lightning Network to understand some of the issues around liquidity and ensuring that you have enough capacity to store certain flows. So this is something that you would deal with in wastewater treatment, where you might have some inflow. Well, you need some place to put it, and that is almost exactly the same issue that is faced with the Lightning Network today. What initially got me into the Lightning Network was trying to make a payment with Bitcoin, and that's what really exposed the an opportunity, if I can say it nicely, to make improvements on Bitcoin payments, on the payment side of things, because I think a lot of people talk about Bitcoin as a store of value and as an investment. Um, so it really goes from investment to being savings, and then the next frontier is, can Bitcoin become a currency, or can it become a medium of exchange and not just a commodity or investment vehicle?
So that brings us very nicely to the latest product that you're offering on your Amboss technology platform. So
Mhm.
that's it's called Rails, right? But first, before we get there, let's talk a bit about Amboss and what you do there.
Sure. So Amboss started really because I met my co-founder who was already building Lightning technologies. So he built ThunderHub, which is an open source node manager, and that's basically where someone can run a Lightning node and actually have a user interface where you could click buttons. It's not just code, and now it's something that you could visualize and be able to understand a bit more. And we noticed that there were some problems with the Lightning Network because you do need to connect to other people. It's not something that you can just do yourself. It's not you and math. Now it's you, math, and other people. And so making those connections and kind of forming a social network was how we initially launched Amboss.space, which is our Lightning Network Explorer. And you can look up any other Lightning node on the network. And then the next problem is, how do you get other people to take action? And the way you get them to take action is through market forces. And so shortly after we launched the Explorer, then we launched a liquidity marketplace, which is where you can buy and sell Lightning channels and get rewarded for it. So that is really the first way that you can earn yield on your Bitcoin, by forming new connections and getting paid for them. If I can make an analogy, it's almost like you're running a power company, and you can earn money with every electron that you deliver to someone's house, just by reading the meter. But you can also make money by building new connections to new homes. And that is analogous to the liquidity leasing. So selling a channel is really like building a new connection to a new home. And then from there, once you've built that initial connection, then you can continue to earn on the electrons that get delivered or the Satoshis that get delivered to that destination.
S-
And really, that's how the yield manifests.
So is that initial like connection that you make, like the power company making a connection, is that like a once-off payment that happens and then you earn like the yield with each electron that gets transferred or each Satoshi that gets transferred in the channel?
That may be where the analogy starts to fall apart, because the connection is only can only tolerate as much usage as the amount of Bitcoin that you allocate to it. So if I allocate a 1 Bitcoin connection to you, the net settlement that can be delivered to you is 1 Bitcoin. But if you start to use that and maybe, okay, to extend the analogy a little bit more, send power back to the grid. So that would be like you making payments over the Lightning Network from your home or from your node. That would actually help balance it out so that you can actually have bidirectional flows. And that is probably the most efficient use of it. So overall, this initial connection, it doesn't last forever, but it can last for years, as long as it's still profitable for both sides. I think people tend to leave these channels open for a very long time, but the initial lease is only for a month or two.
Okay, I understand. So, does your product, your new product Rails, does it automate the management of the entire Lightning management infrastructure?
Yeah. So one thing we noticed is that everything that we've discussed is very technical, and only works for a couple of people that deeply understand this Lightning technology. And so what we built Rails for is for people that have Bitcoin and want to put it to work, and they don't want to do any yield service that has lending or rehypothecation, because that's introduced too much risks to the financial system. I think Bitcoiners have been burned by BlockFi and Celsius and also FTX, where you've got these weird token issuances and all of this trading and leverage. But really, I think the Bitcoiners, they want their Bitcoin to support Bitcoin's growth, not just as a store of value, but also as a medium of exchange. And they don't want to give up custody. And so we set up Rails to be very simple so that people can deposit their Bitcoin on their own infrastructure, their own node. and not have to do the management of it. So Amboss offers as a service Rails so that you can, so we as Amboss can open channels, close channels, set routing fees, and understand a bit of the market. And, you know, you as the customer of Rails really just need to be able to deposit on-chain Bitcoin and be comfortable with self-custody. And, we'll help as much as we can to give you as the customer the 24 words, and then give us as Amboss the limited permissions that we need. So we only want these few permissions to not be custodians, really just opening and closing channels, setting fees, but we don't have the ability to send Bitcoin or withdraw Bitcoin from this account. We can only receive it into that account. So that's really how the system operates.
So, Jesse, I want to take this conversation a bit philosophical. In listening to a few of your earlier interviews, you spoke a bit about the time value of Bitcoin. Can you explain a bit what that is?
Yeah. So like in other systems, there is kind of the risk-free rate of money. And that was something that we stumbled across with Nick Bhatia. He originally wrote this, essentially a blog post on the time value of money and the time value of Bitcoin. So it is something that exists for fiat currency, but the way that the interest rate is generated for fiat currencies is usually through lending or through rehypothecation, and that introduces risk. And additionally, the the underlying is the underlying unit of fiat currency is just freely available to print. So that becomes an issue. So then you're actually having to manage like the idea of an interest rate versus the new creation of money, and understand which one is outpacing the other. And so that's where you get nominal interest rates versus real interest rates. Now for Bitcoin, we've got absolute scarcity here. So with that absolute scarcity, you don't have to worry about the underlying unit being devalued through additional money printing. And so that becomes a much better platform for actually basing kind of a risk-free rate of Bitcoin. And this rate comes from the utility that is delivered. So the value of the network is actually building because this utility value or this utility layer is added to Bitcoin, so that the Bitcoin can be used for payments, not just for savings. And so that's where this additional, yield is derived from additional utility added.
So essentially, if you join this Rails, then you are earning a yield on your Bitcoin through offering liquidity on payment channels.
Yeah. So our job is to grant people access to this new market. So we'll make it completely automated to lease out the liquidity, and also be maintenance free on the actual routing of payments. So we're going to be using machine learning models in the background to actually determine how to allocate this Bitcoin to be useful for the network and provide reliable payments. So that infrastructure, then you as the customer of Rails gets access to almost a derivative on payment activity, so that as more payments happen over the Lightning Network, then your node has a better shot at actually routing those payments and getting to earn payment routing fees or liquidity leasing fees.
Okay, and then you said that the liquidity leasing is almost like in your analogy, like creating the connection to, it's the speaking part of finding other nodes that are on the network and then speaking to them. So creating a connection to them. That's the first part. And then the other part is the actual transactions that happen between them. So can you speak a bit about like how much you earn in both of these different ways of using Rails?
I can only, speak about historical rates. And, anecdotally, my node has earned a bit less than 1% just from payment routing. But we've seen the Magma marketplace, which is where the channels are bought and sold through the liquidity leasing. And historically, that's been 1 to 4% APY on any of those leases. So of course, we're looking for more opportunities to do more channel leases, and that's really where we created some additional automation tools to help businesses adopt Bitcoin as a payment system and get bootstrapped on the Lightning Network. So, when a traditional business would pay payment processing fees to Visa or MasterCard, and they'll generally pay three to 4% of whatever they're earning for payment processing. Now, Lightning is a much better payment technology, so we can continue to deliver fresh liquidity to that business, and that means that at the end of the day, their payment processing is not only faster, but it only costs them 0.5% of the actual payments that they receive, assuming that they are making no payments, because that would actually add efficiency to their system. So really, we offer that in the form of liquidity subscriptions. So any business that runs its own node would actually be able to sign up for a service that says, I plan to receive $100,000 in revenue this month. Let me get the liquidity for that. And that's basically the end of the process. Say, my node is going to receive a lot of payments. And so on a recurring basis, we'll supply the liquidity from the marketplace.
Is that a separate product to what Rails is? What I'm understanding Rails, it's almost like a plug and play instantaneous Lightning Network node that gets deployed and earns you yield without you knowing what to do. But now what you're describing is something where you are a business and you want to do most of your payments over Bitcoin and Lightning. And so therefore you're creating a Lightning node to facilitate that. And you saying that you
Y-
have a product or something that can make it easier for a business to do that, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest pain point that businesses experience is that they don't want to have to manage Lightning channels. So we built a product that is on the other side of the market as Rails. So Rails gives us the supply, but who is demanding the liquidity? Who's demanding the new connections? And so we have to onboard businesses as well. And so that allows us to balance the market. So if we can provide automation services, not just to the supply, but first the demand, that's much more important, because then we have a product that is much higher yielding, because all of that demand, brings up the cost that, or brings up the returns that someone could earn. Because really, the magic of Rails is that everyone that participates is now incentivized to see more Bitcoin payments in real life. We don't just want this thing to magically earn us yield. Really, we're getting them access, and then we're giving them the incentives to start shifting the economy and moving it over to more Bitcoin payments, so that if you, as running a stream, your viewers wanted to tip you and wanted to stream sats to you, well, then we could make sure that you actually have the liquidity in order to receive that, and you have that capacity within your Lightning node to start receiving these instantaneous payments. And then, for our Rails customers, they don't have to think about it. They just put their Bitcoin to work. And, Amboss can manage it in the back end to meet both of those needs of the economy, both for businesses that want to receive payments, and also for, our liquidity providers that want to earn some return on their Bitcoin.
In this example that you've just said, would that mean that the content creator in this way would be like one of the businesses that are having a Lightning node and then payment like goes directly to them? Like, at the moment we're all talking about Nostr and posting on Nostr and getting zapped that way, which is essentially the same thing, right? But that's probably
Yeah.
getting Lightning tips on over custodial wallets. This way, the content creator would be their own Lightning node. Hopefully, use Amboss as a service provider, but then gets sats or gifts or whatever direct hard money in the form of Bitcoin directly from their audience to their own Lightning Network node that's managed by Amboss.
Yeah, this gives us a different path other than complete custody. So I think right now it's very common for any business to actually be using uh, a custodial wallet because the user experience is very high. But for self custody, there's more challenges on the user experience side, and we're doing everything that we can to make it as simple as possible to start receiving Bitcoin. Because, one of my fundamental beliefs is that it's actually easier to earn Bitcoin than to buy Bitcoin. It's cheaper because you don't have to pay these exchange fees. And if you can start converting your existing revenue from fiat money income to Bitcoin income, then you don't have that friction and you can still start saving this hard money, but just through existing payment processing and more efficient payment processing. So my hope is to inspire more businesses to take self-custody and use Amboss's services to support that self-custody. You don't have to give up any permissions to use the liquidity subscriptions at all. So overall, they can just start receiving Bitcoin income and convert their business.
Okay, fantastic. How big are you? How long has Amboss been going?
We've been active for about 5 years now, and Magma has been live for 4 of those years. And now finally, we're able to automate the process.
So let me see if I get this straight,
So
right? Magma is like a peer-to-peer Lightning channel marketplace where you can buy and
mhm,
sell Lightning channels that you've already created. So if you
exactly.
like a new Lightning node that you've just got into Bitcoin, you've orange pilled yourself, you've got some Bitcoin on chain somewhere, you've got a hardware wallet, you've self-custodied, and now you're wanting to get into the payment side. So you learn about Lightning, you set up a Umbrel node or something, and you've open up a channel, but now you're wanting to connect with other people. So that would be the first step. You check out Magma, where it's like
Mhm.
a marketplace where you can buy and sell liquidity. Obviously, you just new, so you'd probably want to buy liquidity, right? You'd want to connect to other open channels.
Yeah. But we've noticed like some confusion on that front because people think, oh, okay, I have a Lightning node now, I'll just earn money on it. Well, it doesn't quite work like that. If you want to be a business and you want to start receiving payments, then you need to buy liquidity so that you actually have enough capacity to store all that revenue that's coming in over the Lightning Network. So the next step is to go to Magma and you could buy Lightning channels, which is really a lease of liquidity. So it's getting that first new connection to your business so that you can begin to receive these Lightning payments.
Okay.
And so that provides the buy side for liquidity, and that ends up translating into yield for another person that is using the putting their Bitcoin to work.
Or from the rail side. So you started out
Exactly.
with Magma, and then so firstly you started out with just like a Lightning viewer, like you'd view other channels and that, and then you formalized your business, became Amboss, and then did Magma. And then how did you progress from that to now Rails? You've got like other products too, don't you?
We do. We've been kind of a product machine over at Amboss, but overall, I think we started with the Explorer. Then we built the liquidity marketplace, Magma, to buy and sell Lightning channels. Um, from there, we actually built risk management, because now you've got a completely decentralized, network, and businesses have some compliance obligations that they need to follow. So we built a separate product for them, and that's for the most conservative of the businesses that do have those compliance obligations, that are regulated businesses and have licenses to maintain. So that product's called Reflex. And then from there, we built Rails, which is completely automated operations. And that's for, high net worth Bitcoiners, or for really the companies with Bitcoin on the balance sheet, which there have just been a ton of those recently, with all the Bitcoin treasury companies. So that covers most of our product suite. And I guess the last piece is probably just the liquidity subscriptions, which is just an automated version of Magma. So you don't have to manually buy. You can just set it and forget it.
Okay, so I heard you mention like Bitcoin treasury companies in other spaces. Do you see much uptake of these companies, like actually using the Bitcoin that they bought up into this, or do they just leave it on exchange and report it on their balance sheet and then use that to raise more capital to continue that Ponzi? Or are they actually like using the Bitcoin in services like yours for the actual network itself?
Um, for let's see, for the Bitcoin treasury companies, soon after we've launched Rails, and it's really only been live for about a month and a half now. But we've got a lot of inbound interest from the Bitcoin treasury companies because they're looking for ways to differentiate. If you're just a company that accumulates Bitcoin, and there's 50 of those Bitcoin treasury companies out there, then, well, how do you stand out from the rest of the crowd? You have to find some novel way to increase your Bitcoin accumulation more so than the other companies. So when Bitcoin treasury companies see Rails, they see as a low risk way to access yields on their Bitcoin, and also do it in a way that actually supports the Bitcoin network. And this isn't some additional Ponzi or using some other blockchain or staking their Bitcoin on, some other chain. This is actually supporting Bitcoin's use as a medium of exchange and getting them access to a market that they wouldn't normally have access to. What we learned as we're talking with these Bitcoin treasury companies is most of them have to use custodians. So their board has to approve any of their Bitcoin treasury operations, and that requires them to use registered custodians. So that's been a barrier that has slowed down Bitcoin treasury companies from taking advantage of Rails. And so it's pushed us to start having conversations with custodians directly, which, because they are licensed custodians, gives them some advantages over others, because they're actually able to commingle funds and create omnibus accounts. So it's basically, we could have smaller holders of Bitcoin actually together create a Rails node that would be very useful to the network, where normally we have to have a 1 Bitcoin minimum, because below that level, the Bitcoin isn't especially useful to the network. It would only support micropayments, but we've got a strong interest in being able to provide large payments over the Lightning Network, because any of those large channels essentially means large pipes for big settlement to happen. And I think, Lightning is a very important payments technology. If we want to move more of the global economy onto Bitcoin, not only does it help it scale, but we also want to provide for larger payments. So instead of wiring money around the world and, having to deal with that process, it's as simple as a Lightning payment. So an exchange of invoices and the settlement happens nearly instantaneously wherever you are in the world, just speaking the common language of Bitcoin, you know, as naturally as the internet.
That's very interesting. Firstly, I was wanting to ask you about the one Bitcoin minimum, and now you've kind of like quasi answered that. But you've also answered like the other one is like with a one Bitcoin minimum, you actually like have much larger channels. And you saying that this is more for maybe cross-border payments, which are like larger volume instead of just paying for the coffee at your coffee shop. And this is where you seeing like wanting to grow the or scaling Bitcoin payments into. So not just micro payments like buying your, but actual payments for much larger goods and services.
Yeah, in this early stage of Lightning Network, I think Lightning has supported micropayments. So the Zaps, little tips that we can send each other over Noster or through other platforms. But I don't think that that's the end of the Lightning Network because it's incredibly efficient technology. It basically means that you can just use simple digital signatures to send value. But if we want to scale that up, you do need the liquidity in the Lightning Network. And so you have to kind of create these big pipes uh, on the Lightning Network with large capital allocations. And so we have to attract that capital, and then we deploy it strategically to make larger payments happen. Because we noticed that wallet providers were having difficulty when their customers wanted to make hotel reservations or buy airline tickets, because those are larger ticket items and it requires that you have larger channels. Yes, of course, you can sometimes do multipath payments where the payment can split and then rejoin, but the reliability suffers in those instances. So we do want to create larger channels that could reach a broad portion of the Lightning Network as a whole, and not be limited by these small, almost test channels that people have created. The hobbyists that are running Raspberry Pis, they don't want to put too much capital on there because it's not enterprise grade infrastructure. But with Rails, we're using Voltage, which does provide that enterprise grade infrastructure, allowing us to make these larger allocations. So when we see these large channels like 14 Bitcoin, that's the largest channel that we've ever seen on the Lightning Network. Today at these prices, that would be able to process a $1.4 million payment instantaneously. So that is a huge unlock for any of the firms that want to do high frequency trading or arbitrage. Essentially, it equips them with all of the infrastructure that they'll need to execute very large payments very quickly. So we could support interbank settlement or e-commerce, any of these things with large payment flows, which makes up a huge portion of the economy.
Okay. Jesse, I've got like one final question for you for today. I saw a tweet recently where this author was like comparing uh, sending the same transfer over the Lightning Network versus doing it on chain. And
Mhm.
it worked out that at the moment on chain is much cheaper than the Lightning Network. Maybe because the mempool's down, not many scammers are like minting JPEGs or whatever. But do you see any problem with that? Like, on-chain fees are cheaper at the moment, so why use Lightning?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes down to really the user experience. I think if you could use gold to transfer and settle payments, you could use on-chain Bitcoin, and Lightning is not at all in opposition to using on-chain Bitcoin. Really, it's just a scalability method to make the trade-offs to say, I want this payment to settle faster, or I think that really strikes at the heart of it. We want faster payments, and in the future, we know that there's not enough blockchain space. There's not enough block space for everybody to actually have their own, UTXO, and we do have to think about ways to scale that. So Lightning is another way to actually make the payment processing ability of Bitcoin to be essentially unbounded, where Bitcoin could really only process about 7 transactions per second. Lightning is unbounded on that front. So if we get large scale usage of Bitcoin, on chain simply won't be an option. And we'll have to think about other ways to do that. Granted, there's other ways to scale Bitcoin. Lightning is not the only way, but it's the only one that makes the scalability unbounded. Or you could use a side chain like Liquid, and that would give you a scalar multiple on how many transactions could be processed. But it's a simple multiple instead of an unbounded function. So really, you could put the transactions of the world on a Bitcoin by using the Lightning Network, and some of the other scaling of technologies don't work to that degree.
Jesse Shrader, thank you so much for being on Streaming Sets. It was lovely talking to you. Thank you for educating us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
I hope to speak to you again. I've got so many more questions, but I want you to enjoy your time in Barcelona and being a digital nomad a bit more.
I appreciate it. I'll be having a good time here.
Bye bye.